Welcome to the No Name Brand Podcast. My name is Sashka Hanarappel, actress, singer, dancer, turned brand marketing, sales, and advertising strategist who brands your soul. And each week I bring you an inspiring person or message to help you discover your undergod, turn up your leadership notches, challenge the status quo, because you're fast and furious with a powerful message to share with the world. Thank you for taking time out with me today, and without further ado, let's get our creative and wisdom juices flowing. Have you ever asked yourself these questions? There must be more to life than this. More to life than fixing problems, but rather getting people to a place of thriving and enjoying life. How do you make a decision that you can totally trust and learn to zone out advice from outside influences that are all over the place and inadequate? How do you know when thought is trustworthy? What's wisdom and what's not? Our next guest, a psychotherapist, but more importantly, a 3 principles expert, wanted something that she'd seen in 2 therapists that she too wanted: to have a good time, emotionally, and just be. And she wanted to learn that for herself. And that she did. Please help me in welcoming our next guest, where our topic for today is about feelings that teach us about our thinking. Here she is, ladies and gentlemen, ANNIKA HURWITT. Hello, ANNIKA.
Hi, how are you doing? So nice to be with you today.
Nice to have you here as well. Well, it's fun to have you here today to speak about I love things like this, these deep topics. Well, it's not really deep. It's just things that we don't touch upon. So I'm really excited to speak to you about this and find out about this and enlighten the listeners as well, because it's things that what is wisdom? Is it trustworthy? How do I make my decision? And all these thoughts. So I'm going to dive right in and ask you to share with us, what are the 3 principles? What's this 3 principles expert?
Okay, well, I'm going to try to put them in a context, Sashka, because if I just gave you the definition, it would be like if you were trying to learn to ride a bike, and I said, gravity is a force field that governs how objects move through space. Now ride the bike, you see? Yeah. Principles are abstract and they go beyond cognition. So the definition of them doesn't do that much for us. They're experiential. But what I will say is that a very simple man named Sydney Banks had a realization in the early 1970s that there are 3 principles that govern every psychological experience that we have, as well as our spiritual evolution. And that realization triggered a state of enlightenment for him that went on for quite a long time. And he quit his job as a welder and moved to an island off of Canada called Salt Spring and started giving talks. And the mental health of the people on the island just came up and up and up so dramatically.
Wow.
That in the 1970s, there were 500 people a day taking the ferry out to this tiny little island. And the results he was getting started attracting the attention of psychotherapists who came to study with him. And that was how I got started. I went to a weekend with one of those 2 psychotherapists because I was trying to make a big decision in my life. And I didn't know what kind of thinking to trust. And I did my research and I consulted other psychotherapists, and everybody had these techniques and processes for, evaluating your decision, putting points next to the pros and the cons. And my gut just told me that did not lead to a trustworthy decision. And because I was struggling with this, somebody recommended I go to this seminar. And it was there that I was introduced to the 3 principles. But what I was introduced to more than that was 4 days of being in a seminar with 2 leaders who were living the principles, meaning they were naturally present without the use of techniques and exercises.
Wow.
And from that state of mental presence, they had enormous mental clarity. And they were having much more fun than any psychotherapists I'd seen before. Because psychotherapists traditionally are always working on their stuff. And I thought I was actually leading the field of helping people of psychotherapy at that point. I'd always been a what I called a spiritually oriented psychotherapist, searching for the link between the spiritual and the psychological. And it simply didn't exist in the field. And I thought there must be more to life than just working on your stuff. So I was leading the field, and I went to this seminar, and there I found the link between the psychological and the spiritual living and breathing in front of me in these two seminar leaders. So I will say what the principles are, but I want to talk more about how they impact you, because that will mean something to people. The principles themselves, I usually teach as sort of hold this in the background, and we'll keep coming back to them because they'll inform everything that I teach you. But they're not what I teach you. They're too abstract, really, and too big. So what Sid Banks realized, the way he describes it is that one of the principles he used the word mind for, and he used that term to describe really a larger universal mind that has an intelligence built into it that is the source of life. It's what powers everything up in a very neutral way. Thought is one of the three principles, and that's the human capacity to, well, let me say it a different way. One of the ways Sid Banks described thought is it's a spiritual conveyor belt that we place our personal thoughts in, and then we experience them as real. So consciousness, which is one of the three principles, I don't want to say it's the third, they're not in any order, brings our thinking to life. So the principle of thought is what powers up our thinking. Consciousness brings it to life. So if you thought about the analogy of a movie projector, thought, well, the electricity is mind, it's powering it up. Thought is the specific film clips of the movie. Consciousness is when you turn the light on in the projector, and now you see the movie and you start to have experiences of your thoughts about the movie. And the fact is, that's what's generating the human experience every second of our life. And while I had heard many times before I was introduced to the principles, you create your own reality, you should think positively, you should reframe your thoughts, it never did much for me. And that's because there's something about learning something as a principle that is entirely different, because principles do the work for you.
Yep.
So when you learn about this thought in the context of these principles, what you're learning, Sashka, is to gain from the benefit that pre-existing principles that are set up for us to function perfectly psychologically can bring you. It's a long sentence. And what that looks like is starting to have more and more awareness of your feelings as your GPS system to show you when you've gotten lost in your thought process. And so that's a whole nother little topic, and I'll pause because I've talked a lot.
I'm with you. I understand. I know where you're going. I actually have tattooed on my arm, thoughts become things.
Yeah.
Because I'm so much, or I used to be, well, I'm a creative and a visionary. So we're so much in our minds. Yeah. And there's all these stories happening and conjuring up things, and they're not real. It's just in my mind until I put it on paper, which would be the conveyor belt, and then put it into action, manifesting it. But by seeing it, then I'm like, actually, I don't want that to happen anymore. So I need to take it out of my mind and onto paper and not just leave the thoughts in my mind, which is one, you talk about thinking like garbage thinking. So you have a phrase that you use, and you teach how to turn this thinking into mental freedom.
Yes.
I love that. I was like, oh my God. So can you expand how one is able to achieve mental freedom? Like a lot of people get it through meditation, but even if we in a crowd or whatever, you can also meditate through your breathing, or is it switching off your consciousness, switching on the consciousness?
Yes.
How?
Great questions, because this is about how do you harness pre-existing principles? And how is that different than using exercises and techniques? I was a big time meditator for many years, and I used to go on long meditation retreats, and I was very frustrated because it never took much time for the benefit of the meditation practice to wear off and for me to be back in a stressful experience of life. And I thought I just had to keep increasing my meditation and going on longer and longer retreats. And I did that for, a long time, probably 20 years.
Wow.
And when I got introduced to these principles, what happened is that my mind got so quiet. I didn't really realize it until I was on my way to a meditation retreat. And usually I would be so excited because I would be thinking, I'm going to get relief from all this mental stress. And I realized as I was driving to this retreat that I didn't have the mental stress.
Wow.
And then I thought, and then kind of my heart sank because this had been a lifestyle for me. And I was part of this community that was very beautiful, but I didn't want to spend 3 to 5 days or even a day working on practices to quiet my mind, which was already quiet. I wanted to be out in life, creating all the things you can create when your mind is functioning in an optimal way without a lot of stress.
Oh, you're speaking my language.
Oh, good. So I'll tell you what makes this the most user-friendly is to understand it as a paradigm. And I'll go through this. In the way we live in our culture today, particularly as, well, just among people in general, and the way our psychological experience is talked about in psychology, is what we call a mixed paradigm, which talks about the human experience as if our feelings come from events and circumstances, a breakup, financial troubles, a difficult childhood, etc. And it also talks about it as if the psychological experience, the feelings we have, come from our thinking. And if you think about it, it can't come from both places. On the level of logic, either our thoughts are the source of our feelings or events and circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
So people will say, oh, you're bummed out because you had a breakup. Breakup is the source of your feelings. But it'll wear off and then you'll feel better and, you'll get better thoughts about it and you'll have better feelings. Well, the problem is there's a logic built into the way our brains function. And when we keep giving ourselves messages that are illogical, what it does is it creates a fundamental insecurity in the human psychological experience. Is it my thinking or is it the breakup?
Mm-hmm.
Now, when I think it's the breakup, what happens is my mind in this insecure state is our minds function like obedient dogs. It's like when you point it towards, it's from something outside you, your mind goes fetch. Okay, remember what happened the last time you broke up? How do people get over things? How do people deal with things in your family? And the mind is capable of 100,000 to 200,000 thoughts a day. Mm-hmm. So it's generating thinking at a lightning pace, much of which is unconscious. But you're feeling every one of those thoughts, and it's looking more and more real to you that the breakup is the source of your feeling. Mm-hmm. Now, what we teach people is to recognize that as what we call an outside-in experience in life, meaning you are in the illusion that something outside you is causing your feelings. Mm-hmm. Yes, you are likely when you have a breakup to have upsetting thoughts.
Yeah.
But you might not. You might think, thank God it's finally over. Whatever you think is what you'll feel. It's not saying that the breakup didn't happen, not saying that tragedies don't happen, not saying that events and circumstances can't be challenging, but it is a fact that a human being never feels anything unless they think it. Mm. So you could be going through a tragedy and simply not know it because you hadn't gotten the news yet and you wouldn't be feeling it.
Yeah.
And then when you do know it, what you think is what you feel. And so what we teach people is there's a set of feelings that characterize being lost in the illusion that something outside you is putting feelings in you, primarily characterized by insecurity. You'll also almost always be experiencing a busy mind and stress, and it could be a host of other feelings. That when you recognize that you're outside in, that you're in an illusion, that something outside you is putting a feeling in you, you just look to realize that in point of fact, let's say your upset in this case is coming from your thinking in the moment about the breakup. What happens, and this is what my clients experience, and it's only really from what you experience that's what matters. That's how you realize principles, is through your experience. They will say, oh, I feel calmer now. So now the mind is dropping thought on its own. No techniques or exercises. I feel more secure. This is because you've aligned yourself with how the mind actually works 100% of the time. And I have my clients run this experiment until they see the truth of it. Don't take my word for it. Just go out in life and keep trying. See if you can think one thing and feel something else. And usually the piece that takes a while, there's a few pieces that take a while to sink in. One of them is, we're not saying that bump up against challenges, that life isn't painful sometimes, that we don't experience tragedy and loss. We are saying, though, there's no causal link to our feelings except our own thinking. That's a fact.
Yep.
And when people become aware of that fact on an ongoing basis, it allows your mind to function with maximum efficiency the way nature designed it to. So that when you do experience a loss or a tragedy, you grieve in a way that is appropriate. You don't carry it beyond what your mind needs to heal from it. So you will feel like you're grieving in a way that's healing, and you will become more resilient and get over things more quickly, which we see all the time. So this is starting to be brought into some major hospitals, and in a very short amount of time, a day and a half seminar and a couple of follow-up coaching sessions, the burnout rate for doctors has reduced enormously.
Wow.
Yeah, where this goes into prisons, we tend to have the lowest recidivism rate in any place in the country. Where I work with all kinds of psychological issues, and I work in organizations. I'm primarily, my passion is working with women leaders and getting more women leaders out into the world, because we need more women leaders, and our world needs a lot of help right now. But where this goes into organizations, you see a huge improvement in company culture, much more mental clarity and presence, and lower employee turnover and more productivity. So it's, again, with principles, they're universal constants. It's not like they just apply to business or just apply to psychotherapy. They apply to the human experience 100% of the time in all circumstances.
I love that. I love the cause effect thing. Totally understand it. Yay! Someone's getting me.
I know. That's how I felt 25 years ago. I just couldn't believe it. It's like, oh, somebody's finally given me an answer that makes sense, And now that's all I've taught for 25 years, and it never gets old.
I love it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Whilst you were talking, there were so many things going through my mind, but I've seen it more in terms of energy than thoughts. Like with my kids, especially being empaths, and they'll attract a lot of energy from a lot of children and react to that in a negative way. Yeah. And for myself, being very calm, surprisingly, and looking at the whole situation and not seeing it as just in front of me in a box, but seeing the wider aspect, like where's it all coming from? It's like this matrix thing that comes in. And how does one thing have a cause, and what's the effect, and what tools to use, but whilst I'm doing it, it's just calm. It's just like a natural thing happening.
Yes.
So I'm I don't say try, because that means I'm not really wanting to. I am achieving mental freedom in my own way. I never got into meditating.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because nature has designed us so that in a crisis, our minds get very calm and very present.
Yep.
Why? Because there's an evolutionary intelligence behind life that wants the human race to survive. When you get calm and present, the highest level of intelligence is available to you. So in a crisis, you get inside out, as I describe it, very quickly. As mothers, we do that a lot. We get very calm. So do people in floods and car accidents and all sorts of situations. Also, high-performing athletes will describe how that calm just settles in and they find themselves doing things to win the game. They have no idea where the ideas are coming from. It's way beyond what's in the personal mind. So we all have that as human beings. We have access to that transcendental level of thinking. And of course, it's delightful. You know, it's so delightful to not be just listening to what's in your personal database all day long. Yeah, really boring. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And, you know, I haven't lived there for 25 years and my heart goes out to so many people who do. And it creates so much stress and boredom and wears on relationships.
That's so true. You're speaking about boredom now, and one of my questions is about innovation and creativity, the opposite. Well, if you're not in the state of innovation and creativity, boredom comes up. How does our thought block this, and how can we release the clutter to receive more inspiration and motivation to let the flow? I almost don't actually want to use the word more because it just feels like overwhelm, but to have that flow of, you know, how can we reach that, the mental freedom of that it just flows?
Yeah, I'm going to start to sound repetitive. It's always the same thing. So when you're bored or overwhelmed or blocked, you're outside in about something.
Yep.
When you get inside out, you're going to experience everything from calm and common sense to wisdom and insight and creative inspiration. So when we're inside out and mentally present, what happens is that the mind does what it needs to do to take care of itself and to function at its best, because that's nature's design. Yeah. I mean, that just makes so much sense. Everything else in nature is designed to work perfectly. Why wouldn't we be? So if your mind is overstressed, the first place it may go when you become inside out and present is to rest. You might feel exhausted. You might feel like you need to sleep for a while to recover from all the mental stress that's been generated. When the mind is rested, you naturally become creative and inspired and innovative. This is why research shows people get their best ideas when they're on vacation.
Yeah.
So
that's pretty, I don't know. I don't.
Most people get their best ideas.
Yeah,
The second place is the shower. Yeah. And,
or the toilet.
Or the toilet. Some people will say driving. It's wherever thought drops for you. Where you, without realizing it, say to your mind, okay, I'm off duty. I can allow thought to drop. And then the mind drops thought on its own. And then those ideas come in.
Oh, that's so cool. I tend to be, because I come from a performing arts background, and for me, the more adrenaline there was, the calmer I'd be. So it was that adrenaline before going on stage and performing, and then once you're there, it was just like, oh.
Yes. I find that
flowed.
with speak at conferences a lot. We have conferences all over the world, and I find that adrenaline is a good sign, because it means that when I get on the stage, it'll just flow through me.
Exactly. Yeah. Woo, so cool. What was your first experience in the world of psychology where you failed miserably, and how did you rise up above it?
Let me preface this by saying I was not interested in psychology. I was a journalist initially in my 20s.
Oh, wow.
Never took a psychology course as an undergraduate.
Cool.
Then when I found that I couldn't make a living as a journalist, I thought, people always come to me for help. I'll just start counseling people. And I went back to school and got a master's in counseling. But even back then, before the principles, it was really an alternative approaches to counseling, because I was very suspicious of psychology. It didn't make sense to me that there was a whole field based on what was wrong with people. It just went against my instincts. So I studied it all with kid gloves, and then I taught for a while. I taught in a master's program for Lesley College. I taught teachers how to bring the arts into education, and I also taught some psychological developmental courses for them. So I guess that, I prefaced the whole psychological failure thing in that way, because I was never looking to succeed as a psychotherapist. But so let me think about that though. Gosh, I've been counseling and coaching for 35 years. So I would really have to think for a while before I could remember my first.
Rewind.
Yeah, I wish I could just rewind it. But I couldn't with any honesty tell you just off the top of my head. I probably have to think for a few days.
But that's pretty interesting. Like, not deliberately failing at the psychology thing, but it was just kind of like, oh, really? But I want to go in that direction. But it's like
Well,
in my way. Can you just move
and
on?
my very first brochure said, the human psyche gravitates towards health. And when I found the principles, what gets revealed when you realize you're feeling the thinking in the moment is that everyone has innate mental health.
Mm.
When the mind gets calm, it is able to get over
whatever
habits it's developed that then we diagnose and medicate, right? Which I'm not a big fan of.
Yeah.
So I've always had an instinct for it, and the principles gave me the understanding I needed to facilitate people realizing how resourceful they are, how mentally healthy they are. So I have a passion for that, and I have a 16-year-old daughter, and so I've ended up working with a fair number of teens, which because the parents, they see my daughter, she went through a hard time when I got divorced, and she was actually being bullied at the same time. There's some wonderful videos of her talking about this on film when she was about 12 that are one of the most watched videos in our community. So people see how she took a real dive and came back up because of the principles. So I hadn't really, my passion, as I said, is working with leaders, and in particular women leaders. I hadn't planned on working with teens, but I absolutely love doing it because to see people that young suffering as much as they do and then realizing how healthy they are. And it's just like watching a plant that hasn't been watered get watered and just come back to life. And then you realize that they have a whole life ahead of them that is going to be successful and happy. So I kind of link my work with teens into my work with leadership, in that I'm creating healthy teens who can go on to become leaders.
I love that.
Yeah.
And I always say there's 3 peaks in our lives. We're very lucky if we experience all 3, but we mainly only experience one. My peak is in my profession right now, but my second peak that I really want to achieve is working with teenagers. It's always been like that, and exactly for this reason. And I see exactly with my kids also being bullied, or they're just different. They're leaders, and it's, it's lonely at the top when you're a leader.
Yes.
And there are a lot of things that happen, and it's like, wow. And if you don't see it and help give tools, because you can't prevent the mistakes, you have to let them go through it, or I have to let my kids go through it. But just giving them tools to be able to go, well, that makes life a little bit easier and combat a little bit of the things. So those are one of my things as well. So exciting. So you're speaking about leadership. So, and women leaders, what are you offering? Any programs to work with women leaders, or?
Yes, I am. I'm going to start a practitioner's program for women leaders in March of 2018. And that's a 9-month program that will involve 2 in-person retreats in Boston. But I often have people sign up from all over the world, and they can live stream it. And then there'll be individual coaching and monthly webinars. And also I'll help each woman. I'm going to accept 12 women leaders. It's already about a quarter filled up, and I'm going to help each woman design a program for her organization and deliver it. Wow.
That's amazing.
It's been a theme with me for the last 10 years. And I'm very excited to, now that my daughter's a bit older, be able to really, really put my focus there. So that'll be on my website within a day or two, because we've just finished designing that program.
Awesome. We'll put the links in the show notes as well, so that'll be available as well. With leadership, I absolutely love leadership, and just with kids as well, because they don't know that they have it in them as well. They're just natural born leaders.
That's right.
It's just the segregation, how they get separated everywhere. Which leaders inspire you, and why?
Well, that's an interesting question. gosh, you're going to have to give me a minute here.
No worries. I'll have a sip of my tea.
All right, you can edit this, right?
Yeah.
Well, Barack Obama inspires me enormously, as well as his wife, Michelle.
Mm.
And one of the things that I noticed when he was campaigning and when he was president was that he seems to have these principles naturally. And the reason I say that is if you watch him speak, he'll pause and listen for fresh thoughts. He has his speech, but he completely shoots from the present in a way that's very unusual. And my sense of him is that he's continually able to position his mind to receive the highest level of intelligence available to us, which is what I coach leaders to do. Same with Michelle, off the charts. So, you know, Elizabeth Warren in America, she's a senator from Massachusetts, and she's been very outspoken. Of course, we've been having very tumultuous times politically. Bernie Sanders, these are people I admire tremendously. What I love about Bernie Sanders is he not only is a campaigner for the truth, he's very, very bright, and he knows how to deliver his talks in a way to get right to the point. He's extremely efficient, you know, in the way he does his politics and the way he's passionate without being reactive. And I think that's a very important thing to look for in leaders, is their capacity to be, you know, empowered and effective and passionate without being reactive.
Yeah.
Because when you become reactive, you lose your power. I like Elizabeth Warren because she has guts. She's a very courageous woman, and she stands for the truth, and she fights for the truth. And we have needed a fighter in many situations, in recent times politically. So, you know, normally I'm not that oriented towards politics, but because of the times that we live in, they're in all of our face and awareness every day. Beyond them, I admire Mahatma Gandhi, you know, not to sound cliche, but he also was a leader who I feel very much had very high integrity and really knew how to listen for his wisdom, and he lived by it completely. And that is the sign of a leader who is really connected to the present and to these principles, is the capacity to turn on a dime, change your program, stop eating if that's what makes sense to you, do what the truth dictates, regardless of how it looks to other people. So that would be Mahatma Gandhi. And there is a way that when you are connected to the present, you transcend the normal limitations that society imposes on you.
Yeah. I find it so interesting when I ask this question, even though we take a bit of time to think about it, it's very interesting that when we talk about leaders, the majority of people that we not look up to, admire, or respect as individuals are more masculine than feminine. And what's very interesting is that through women leadership, women are creators and the men destructors, although they're seen more as leaders than the women as creators.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's very interesting because from the people that you mentioned, for me, for example, I'm Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela, it's all these male figures. And it's always like, we're the woman. Like, we're the woman. But
and this beautiful thing, though, is coming now between Michelle. Everybody loves Michelle Obama. I've never, well, I mean, except perhaps people with very different political beliefs. But I've never seen anyone so widely admired.
Yeah.
And the women have always been leaders. We've run our households and in many times been working at the same time. What you have to do to run a family is to do it well is so complex.
Yeah.
It's just that we just, for a variety of reasons, have not been given enough room to hold the number of leadership positions that we should be holding.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite things in Sheryl Sandberg's book, Lean In, you know Sheryl Sandberg, was the research that she did that showed time and time again that when there's more women leaders, organizations do better, as well as when people of different, both genders and races are treated with equality, everybody does better. The white male majority do better. That we do better as a culture when the strengths of everyone are being honored and drawn upon. And for numbers of reasons that aren't even really all that important, we just haven't had that. And so women have, most organizations they're now showing do better with women leaders than with male. So I'm just doing my part to empower women leaders to do as well as they can do in the positions that they're already in, and to get the promotions that they're looking to get.
I love that. I love that. Annika, we're coming to the end. Unfortunately, we can talk forever, but attention span is only so long.
Yeah.
And I have 2 questions for all of my wonderful people on the podcast that I interview, that I ask them at the end of the interview. And one of them is, how do you want to change the world or challenge the world doing what you do?
Well, that's what I'm doing every day.
Love it.
So I'm changing the world through consciousness. And it's a dream come true for me, because my mother was very political and very radical politically, but she was a very angry person. And I remember when I was a teenager figuring it out, there's something that works better than this. And then as I began studying all the different fields of inquiry and human development, I realized, oh, it's consciousness. And it almost seemed like a dream beyond anything that was actually possible. But I impact people with a shift in consciousness with every person that I work with. And I truly believe that that is the most powerful thing to change our world.
I love that. I love that. Thank you for doing that and for honoring the calling.
Yes, well, I thank the universe for giving me the opportunity. I mean, every day I pinch myself that I get to do what I do.
Wow, that's so cool. I'd love for you to fill in the blanks on 3 of my values, and they are: creativity for you is?
Well, love is what comes to mind.
Oh, I love that. Oh, that's nice.
When I'm in a creative state of mind, I'm filled with love. And what I make of that is that I am connected to that larger universal spiritual mind when I'm in a creative frame of mind.
I love that. Wisdom for you is?
Also love.
Beautiful.
Also love. Because again, you see, when you're in the present, you have access to your wisdom. It's like a delivery. It's a gift. Yeah. It's something that gets gifted to you, and it feels like a gift of love.
That's lovely. Lovely. Hang on words.
I hope I don't have the same answer for the third one.
So let's find out. Yeah. Passion for you is?
It's inspiration and creativity to come full circle. It's that when I feel inspired, I feel that there's something rising up in me. Yeah. And to me, that is passion. Whether I'm this morning developing this program I call Reveal that I'm bringing into organizations, just this passion, rises up in me. It's like a flow of inspiration. Yeah.
I love that. Thank you so much for being with us here today and sharing your wisdom, your knowledge, your creativity, and your passion. I absolutely loved it, speaking my language. I hope for the listeners as well. It'll be awesome. You can find out more about Annika in the show notes. So website, social media handles, and also, is it also called Reveal, the Women Leadership Program?
Well, that will be on my website. And within the week, the Reveal program will be up there.
Awesome. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. That sounds amazing. Thank you so much for being here with us, honoring your calling, and have an awesome day further.
Well, thank you so much for having me. What a pleasure.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Dang, that was just supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. I enjoyed having you on board, and please do me and you a favor. Head on over to iTunes, SoundCloud, or Stitcher. Click subscribe, and a super bonus, leave your review and you stand a chance of being announced and advertised on the show. I'm always striving to ensure that your brand is uplifted and empowered. Remember, done is better than perfect. So be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and send in your feedback too. You're the absolute best. Keep rocking.